Two of the brands on this list cost more than a good used Seiko and a full service. These are my top 5 never-buy watch brands. Every one of them took my money before it ever took my opinion. I've been burned by all of them, standing right here, telling somebody across a counter what their watch is actually worth. I can't do it anymore. Stand behind a repair counter long enough and you stop asking whether a watch is good. You start asking a colder question. Can I still get parts for it in 10 years? Because a watch is never really a purchase. It's a relationship, and somewhere down the line, that relationship sends you a bill. Everything on this list fails that question in its own particular way. And I'm not here to tell you what to like. Taste isn't the argument. Every brand on this list has somebody who loves theirs, and that person isn't wrong. Some context first, because the ground is moving under all of it. The Swiss shipped 14.6 million watches last year. That's 740,000 fewer than the year before, and the industry contracted for a second straight year, down to 25.6 billion francs. The slide carried on through the first 4 months of this year, and in April, watches priced above 3,000 francs fell 19% by value. The expensive end is wobbling. The cheap end is being eaten alive. And the middle is where almost every mistake I see gets made. Those numbers don't tell you what looks good on your wrist. They tell you which watches will still be serviceable in a decade and which ones are already ghosts. Number 5 built an empire out of thin air. $20,000 of starting cash became $228 million of watches in 3 years. 6 million units out the door by the end of the run. Nobody built a factory. They built a feed. With margins sitting near 50%, handing free watches to strangers on the internet was the cheapest advertising anybody had ever invented. And it worked so completely that every brand on earth copied the playbook within 18 months. Then you actually pick one up. It weighs nothing. It's 4 millimeters of case wrapped around a movement you can buy by the tray. The strap is held on by a spring bar and a pin you will never get back in straight on a Sunday afternoon. And the caliber inside is the same commodity quartz you'll find in a $15 watch from a marketplace app. That isn't a rumor anymore. Buyers worked it out, wrote it down, and repeated it until the spell broke. I'm not telling you it's a bad object. It keeps time. It looks exactly like the photograph. What I'm telling you is that you paid $300 for the photograph and roughly $20 for the watch. 4 years later, the battery dies. You bring it to me. And a proper battery change with a fresh gasket and a pressure test costs a meaningful slice of what you paid for the whole thing. That's the moment people find out what they own. And the resale isn't 30% or 20%. On most of these, there is no market at all. Number 4 isn't one brand. It's an entire tier, and it wears a dozen different names on the dial. Same supplier, same movement, same case architecture, different logo, different royalty checkway. The group that builds most of them turned over $224.8 million in the first quarter of this year, down 3.5%, and the revealing part is which names went up. The licensed fashion labels grew. The house brand fell 17%. Direct-to-consumer sales dropped 29%. They shut 7 stores in a single quarter, expect as many as 15 before the year is out, and closed 28 globally in the 12 months before that. Now think about the smartwatches. Thousands of people bought a designer smartwatch specifically because it had a fashion name on the case and looked like jewelry instead of a computer. Then the parent company walked out of the smartwatch business entirely, promised software updates for a few more years, cleared the inventory at $80 a piece, and pulled the last models off the shelves. That's the whole logic of this tier compressed into one product. It exists while the license is profitable, and the second it isn't, the support evaporates and you're left holding an orphan with a sealed back and no parts pipeline behind it. Bring me one now, and I have to say, the sentence nobody wants to hear across a counter. The repair costs more than the replacement. $150 of movement work on a watch that sells new for $120. There's no dignity in that conversation for either of us. And to be fair to them, these companies never claim to be building heirlooms. They're selling an accessory that matches a handbag, and by that standard, they do it well, which is exactly why the licensed names are the ones still growing while everything else shrinks. Just don't confuse an accessory with an investment, and don't pay watch money for handbag engineering. Number 3 is the one that makes enthusiasts furious, and for once I think they're aiming at slightly the wrong target. The ticket says $900. The watch sells for $100. It is always sold for $100, on every channel, every week of the year. A 70 to 85% discount that never ends isn't a discount. It's the actual price wearing a costume. Try to resell one and you'll see 20 to 40 cents on the dollar, and that's with the box, the papers, and the plastic still on the bracelet. Here's the part the pile-on always skips. The hardware is frequently honest. You'll find genuine Japanese automatic calibers in there, not some sealed proprietary module that no watchmaker alive can open and no supplier still stocks. Real steel. 200 meters of water resistance on paper. For what it actually sells for, it is not a scam. And I've had customers wear the same diver for a decade on nothing but a fresh gasket and a battery. What I object to is the theater, because the theater is the product. Somebody walks in convinced they own a $900 watch, and I'm the one who has to tell them what it really is. Quality control swings hard between examples, too. Two identical model numbers, two completely different finishing standards, loose end links and a soft bezel action on one, a perfectly tight bracelet on the next. That's a coin flip, and I stopped gambling with other people's money a long time ago. Buy it knowing exactly what it is, and you'll be happy. Buy the sticker price, and you've been had. Number 2 hurts, because I badly wanted this one to be true. I wanted the whole story. The factory in the collapsed city, the trained workers, the American watch industry sitting up in bed after 40 years. Then federal investigators looked at the supply chain and found that 100% of the materials in certain watches came from somewhere else. Regulators read built in Detroit exactly the way they read Made in America, a claim that requires all or virtually all of the significant parts and processing to be domestic. So the qualifier arrived on the case back. Swiss and imported parts. The slogan about where American is made had to go. The movements come out of Switzerland through an outside supplier, with components sourced from Switzerland, China, and Thailand. And that is a completely normal way to build a watch. Half this industry does it, and nobody blinks. The problem is that normal wasn't what was being sold. In fairness, the founder pushed back hard, and he wasn't wrong on the facts. He said many of these components simply aren't manufactured in America anymore, that the government's standard is close to unattainable for anybody, and that the mission was always job creation rather than provenance. I believe him. 400 people working in that building is not nothing, and the watches themselves are well assembled and genuinely pleasant to own. But provenance was most of what you were paying for, and provenance is the one thing that didn't survive the audit. Pay for the assembly, the design, and the jobs with your eyes fully open, and you'll be a happy owner for years. Pay for the myth, and you'll feel it on the day you try to sell it. And number 1 isn't a brand at all, which is precisely why it belongs at the top. In 4 fiscal years, American border officers pulled $1.18 billion of counterfeit watches out of circulation. A single parcel intercepted in Kentucky held 584 fakes that would have carried a retail value of $22.5 million. The working estimates put somewhere between 30 and 50 million fake watches entering the market every year. One crown gets seized more than any other name at both American and European borders, and for a single parcel arriving at your door, the ending is always the same. Confiscation, then a press. People tell me the good ones are indistinguishable now, that the movements are cloned right down to the finishing. I know. That was never the argument. The argument is that you own nothing. No warranty. No service network. No parts. No resale. No recourse on the morning it stops running. You can't hand it to your kid. You can't insure it honestly. And you can't sell it without lying to somebody's face. Every dollar of it goes to an operation that answers to nobody and funds things you'd rather not think about over breakfast. And there's a quieter cost that lands right here on this counter. Every fake in circulation makes the real market more paranoid, more expensive to authenticate, and harder for the honest sellers I buy from every week. You didn't buy a watch, you rented a shape, and somebody else is holding the lease. Here's the honest complication, because I'm not going to stand here and pretend the good guys are saints. The major Swiss groups restricted spare parts to their own authorized service centers years ago. Independent wholesalers took them to court over it, and the courts largely sided with the manufacturers, ruling that refusing to supply parts wasn't an abuse of a dominant position. Which means some of the brands I recommend are quietly building the same wall the brands on this list built by accident. So the real lesson was never about logos at all. It's about whether there's a living, funded, parts-supplied path between the watch on your wrist today and a bench somewhere in the future. So buy the watch you can still get parts for. Buy from the companies that publish what's inside the case. Pay a fair price for a fair object and stop paying for the photograph, the permanent discount, the borrowed city, and the borrowed crown. If you want a watch that will outlive you, it costs far less than the internet insists. It always has. And if one of these has been sitting on your wrist for 10 years, running perfectly, keeping time, I mean this sincerely. I'm glad. Keep wearing it. Nothing I said here takes a single day away from that. The floor for a genuinely good watch is much lower than anyone selling you one wants to admit, and that is the entire reason I make these.